Hello, this is Sunil Sunder with Top Preps High School Sports. This morning, I'm happy to be speaking with Glen McNew, the head baseball coach, Preston High School, and owner of Pro PT in Kingwood, West Virginia. Coach McNew, again, thank you so much for taking some time out to speak with me. I really appreciate it.
No, sounds great. I appreciate the opportunity.
Congrats, coach, said on your success, both, said as a head baseball coach and then, as an owner of a, physical therapy business. Can you talk about, I think first, let's get into, being, the head baseball coach of Preston High School here, just, you want to talk about the program itself.
Okay, great. Yeah, I took over. This will be my 7th year as the coach, but my 6th season, because we missed an entire season due to COVID 2 years ago, which is very difficult. It's a great small, rural area, which, is wonderful in some ways, but also brings up a lot of difficulties in other ways as far as, funding, being able to get kids to be able to play during the summers, all that. But I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't have it any other way. It's really fun to try to take it from the grassroots. And, it's one of those things you just have to build, and then you've got to figure out who you got coming next and start building again. So it's a constant challenge, but, we love every second of it.
That's great. I was reading an old article, Coach. I think when you took over, you only had, 11 players, on the roster. Is that correct?
The year before, they finished the season with 9 players.
Wow. Okay.
Our first season, I think we had 21. We normally are right into the 30s every year now, so which is a great thing. Being able to institute a JV program has been a really big help for us. And, we're kind of on a upbuilding tick again. It was really tough because we had a group of, I'm not one of those coaches that believes that a freshman or sophomore can't play. I'm one of those guys that believes that, if you were a junior last year and you started, but there's a freshman better, you better get on it. So we had built that group up to that senior year that we lost due to COVID, and we would have won a lot of games that year.
Yeah.
And they went, they all graduated. So now we're back in the building process. This year's going to be, a little tough for us. Starting next year, though, we're going to be on a really big upswing as far as the players we have coming in and the guys we've had working since they were 6 and 7 years old. So it's gonna be a lot of fun coming up.
That's terrific. I know that again, reading that article when you took over the program, that you really stressed about the fundamentals of the game.
Let me turn this off so you don't have to listen.
Sure, no problem.
Telemarketers are brutal.
I hear you.
Yeah. So what was the question again?
That when you took over the program, you had a game plan, set up in terms of stressing the fundamentals of the game, in terms of how the players conduct themselves, and with the school, the community. I wanted to ask you about that because I think that's important. You mentioned whether they started or they came off the bench. To have that team concept. To be, and as far as the coaches also being open-minded, being responsible as well. Just wanted to ask you about that as well, Coach McNew.
Okay, well, I'm a firm believer that a lot of what our responsibility as youth coaches, and I include high school as youth coaches, is that a lot of our responsibility gets lost in wins and losses. I'm a firm believer that my job as a coach is, first of all, to teach these kids how sports can lead them into being more successful in life. I'm on a 6-year streak where I've had at least one kid go play college baseball. But what are the odds of that kid getting any further than that? So what are the odds of any of my kids moving on to play college? So if I feel like if I can teach them responsibilities and the work ethic that sports can teach you, along with the responsibilities of representing your community correctly, your school correctly, and that's not just during baseball season. You might play other sports, but I still expect you to represent your school how I expect it during baseball season. Your parents, your family, your community, like I said, your school. If you can learn that responsibility along with the work ethic it takes to be successful at something, especially sports, it's going to lead you to success further on in life. And I think a lot of guys get lost in wins and losses and not teaching those lessons that need to be taught to young adults.
That's true. No, that's well said.
Yeah, go ahead. I will literally, if I hear a senior walk by my truck and tell a freshman to pick up the catcher's gear, he's going to run some laps before practice after he carries the catcher's gear down there. It's the same with all, my kids' friends think I'm the biggest jerk because my kids aren't allowed to play video games during the week. I want them to learn what it takes to be successful once they've graduated high school. And it's a lot of kids get to college and it's a major adjustment because they've never learned those kind of things, because high school is easy for most kids. I'm sorry, it is, so you got to understand what it's going to be like once you get out of your parents' house.
Yeah. Hey, what I wanted to ask you, in terms of the support from the community, Preston High School, the administration, athletic department as well, Coach McNew.
We get amazing support from our community, from our administration. Our athletic director, his name's Mitch Channel. He is wonderful. Does anything we ask. It's what he's capable of doing. Now that's one of the problems you run into for a rural community like we're in is, we don't have the money that our community doesn't have the money that a lot of places do. So it makes it very difficult for things as far as, and, you throw that on top of COVID and being a responsible person and not wanting to put a bunch of people in a building to do some type of fundraiser, makes it very difficult. When I first started, our infield was, a hole around first, second, third base and home plate. That was it. No baselines, no even, so we raised about, I think the whole project ended up being about $42,000. And we now have one of the nicest playing surfaces that you'll see. But as far as, so it's that kind of difficulty that we run into where we have to really work hard to, keep all of that stuff together, upkept, but at the same time, it's also teaching us coaches that we need to be putting some work into it too. So I don't have a problem with that. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, no, great point you made. I wanted to ask you about facilities as well, because that plays such a, pivotal role in terms of, having, that interest that kids, are willing to put in the time, in terms of playing a sport. I want to ask you just about COVID. Sorry.
That was my wife. I got to answer that one.
Oh, no. I fully agree.
Go ahead. What were you saying?
Actually, before I get to, the challenges with COVID, I wanted to ask about that pipeline, where it starts early on, it said Little League, well, in terms of of the kids moving up the ladder and eventually, landing in high school. Can you talk about that, Coach?
Baseball to me is a very, very different sport than other sports. I'm a firm believer in kids playing as many sports as they can in high school. I mean, I'm never going to say, hey, don't just play one sport. I think but I'm also a firm believer that if I have a kid that comes out to play baseball, that's got a chance to get a basketball scholarship, he's never going to play. I'm also a firm believer that the coaches step up and go, hey, man, I really appreciate you coming out, but you probably should be working on this other sport. So baseball is different in the fact that, basketball can, football can lift weights. Basketball can pick up a ball a couple months for a season. Yeah. Baseball, especially in hitting and arm care, it's a year-round thing. So in a community like ours, which is difficult, I'm also a firm believer that, youth leagues around in any place, they're wonderful for kids. They're wonderful. You get them involved in the communities, get them playing. But at the same time, if your goal is to be let's say a college baseball player, you're not going to reach the level. You're not going to be able to play against the level of competition you need playing in youth leagues. You got to get out and play travel ball. Yeah. Same as if your kid is the best player in the youth league, he's playing in the wrong age group. I'm a firm believer in that. If you got an 11-year-old kid and he's way above the rest of 11-year-olds, he should be playing 12U. So in a community like this, it's tough for people to drive an hour and a half a day to go play travel ball, or twice a week to practice, and then you're driving every weekend, paying the fees that are involved in travel ball. Mm-hmm. So that's in our community. That's what makes it very difficult for our program. A lot of our kids will play youth league up until they're 12 years old, and then they never play again until they're 15 years old in high school. Yeah. It's very hard to redevelop those skills when they haven't played for 2 or 3 years. A lot of times you get them to where they're starting to develop those skills by the time they're a junior or senior, and then a freshman comes in who has been playing, travel ball, hasn't stopped and is ready to go.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's hard to say, well, you need to do this when if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. That's just the bottom line of it. Also, parents are working. It's hard to get kids here and there.
Yeah.
This day and age, it's not like, everybody's having to work and work and work to be able to, afford their house payments, much less to be able to go play, drive an hour and a half to practice, play all those fees and things like that. So it's a very difficult balancing act between developing a winning program and being able to under that. And I think that's a lot of problem. A lot of guys don't understand that. They really try to, you have to do this, you have to do that. Well, nobody has to do anything, first of all. You know what I mean? It'd be great for us to get them to do that, but I can't, can't say you have to do this when their parents can't afford it. But at the same time, if you want your kid to reach that level, it's part of the deal. You kind of have to get out in the summertime and play. Both my kids, I've got a 12-year-old and my other son will be a sophomore playing for me this year. They start in March and it's normally October by the time they're done playing baseball.
Yeah.
You
can speak, from experience, coach, because you were a multi-star athlete at Mullins High School. I mean, you played football, basketball, baseball, golf, you ran track. Right. So, I mean, you did it all. So for, in terms of like, sure. Telling, informing, said kids, about, what you were able to accomplish, when you were attending, high school.
Well, it's a double-edged sword. It's a long time ago. I'm old. I ended up playing quarterback at West Virginia in college. I got a scholarship, which is great. But at the same time, like I said, if you can play multiple sports and actually play, that's a great thing. But at the same time, sports have become so specialized. So if you are a kid who's got a chance to get his school paid for, it's very difficult to play 3 different sports because you're losing out on so much training for one of those sports. So it's such a balancing act. And when parents ask your advice on things like it's a very difficult question to answer. And I don't ever want to tell a kid, you shouldn't play this. But what I always tell them is play that sport. But if you're not getting to play and you have a chance to make it past high school at another sport, you probably do need to specialize a little bit. And that's a tough conversation to have, and you hate to have that conversation. But there are a lot of kids that play 3 different sports but never play in a couple, maybe one of those sports. So it's a tough balancing act between all that. It really is.
No, I agree. I was going to ask you about COVID, like just dealing with the challenges with that, in terms of not only coaching but then also with games itself, practices. Can you just describe what the last 2 years have been for you, coach?
I mean, I'll get into this part, whether you want to keep this part of the interview or not. As you well know, everything in our country has kind of seemed to have divided right down the middle in the last few years. Also coming to things like masks, so we have to practice inside a lot. Obviously, I've got 3 inches of snow and, there'll be 2 feet at some point. So it's a very difficult thing to balance as a coach when it comes to COVID is because, we have to practice in the gym sometime. So half of these kids, I want our kids to wear masks. I actually enforce it. You can't practice inside without one on. And I'll get parents come to me saying, hey, you shouldn't do that. We don't believe. Okay. And that's not the point. It's not a political statement with me. The statement with me is I've got to get 30 games in basically 2.5 months. So we wear masks because if I get one kid come in there and infect my team and we get shut down for 10 days, I've pretty much lost a third of my season, once we start playing games. So that's one of the very difficult things to balance. My situation that we'll get into later makes it very difficult, COVID wise. But it's the big balancing act is with baseball, it's such a start, boom, 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 boom. Then it's over. 10 days off, you're in trouble. So getting people to understand that we're not making a political statement or any type of statement by saying we're wearing masks at practice when we're inside. It's more of we got to do this to make sure our season gets played, we had a lot of division when COVID first hit, when they canceled all the seasons. But, sometimes you have to take a step back and realize that although sports are really important, they're not as important as we think they are. So we had a lot of people, they can't cancel. You know what? Yeah, they kind of had to. And I know it was awful for those seniors. That was
that's what I was going to get to, the seniors, because they never can reclaim that, time back. That's it,
Right. And we actually got together and none of the coaches got there. We got some of the seniors in our conference together and just let them play a doubleheader against each other.
Yeah.
Just so they could play a game after that summer once everything was released and we were allowed to get back to stuff. And that's brutal. But at the same time, like, I understand, you got to understand that things are more important than what's best for you sometimes. And you just got to take a step back sometimes and really understand that, So yeah, COVID's been difficult. Who knows how long it's going to continue to be difficult. I think we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel now.
Yeah.
But as far as you still have to take all the precautions and all that, because, my oldest son's basketball team has been quarantined twice, and, you don't have time to make up all those games in a high school season. You just don't.
Yeah.
So
no, I agree.
Makes it very, very difficult balancing act.
No, I agree. I wanted to ask you, you talked about that component with the relationship with the parents. I'm wondering with the colleges and universities, because trying to see like where some of these star athletes in terms of, there's so much with the training videos, of games and practices, highlight companies out there. We see social media, again, is so essential, Huddle, 247 Sports, YouTube. Just wondering, like, in terms of that, can you talk about that, Coach McNew?
Sure. First of all, I'm a firm believer in, being 100% honest with your players. A kid and his parents come to me and go, "Hey, you think I can play college baseball?" And if they can, I'm going to tell them, yes, this is what you need to do to actually be able to do that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I'll give you an example. 3 years ago, I had a kid who was convinced he could play Division I baseball, and he didn't like it because I told him he couldn't.
Yeah.
I had him 3 or 4 JUCO routes, a couple D3 schools, but he refused to do it. So he went and tried out for a couple D1 schools, didn't make it. So kids don't realize that playing in college gives you a way better chance to make it past college than not playing at all. That seems pretty simple. But, and also, even if you do make it to a D1 and you sit for 4 years and maybe play for one, kind of a much better chance making it if you go to D3 and actually play for 4 years.
Yeah.
So that's a tough balancing act with kids. But yeah, I mean, I talk to all my kids. I've got 2 sophomores right now that 100% have a chance to play college baseball. So you got to promote them on social media. You got to, I'm not a big proponent of having to put uncommitted for 15 and 16-year-olds, but we live in that world. So you have to adapt to that world. You can't just say, I think that's stupid, and just not do it. If that's the world you live in, it's the same as, I look at it the same way as you hear so many coaches in baseball, especially. They're like, well, when I grew up, we were taught this way. Well, that was 30 years ago.
That's right.
If you're stuck in your ways as a baseball coach, you're never going to be a good coach. I'm constantly talking to college coaches and talking to any professional hitting or catching or whatever coach will talk to me, because I don't know everything. I need to keep learning and learning and learning to get my kids to do it that want to play at the next level. I want them to be doing things the way those coaches want to see it done. Mm-hmm. I'm also a firm believer of, I was taught by a guy that was a high school baseball coach. I'm a pretty firm believer that professional guys are doing it the way they do because they know more about it than I do. You know what I mean? So I'm going to try to teach my kids those body movements and those things that those guys are doing at that higher level, so that they can, if they want to get to that level, they can. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to say, when I was in high school, they told you to roll your hands over to get power. Well, now we know that causes you to hit ground balls. You know what I mean? So it's, so many guys are stuck in, they don't want to see the ball lifted at all. Well, that's what they want in college and pro. So if your kid wants to go further, you got to adapt to it, So yeah, it's a tough balancing act, and it's tough when you try to go around the communities and, get the youth league coaches to learn how you're teaching things, and people are mad. Oh, they're not showing up. Well, if half of these guys, they're working till 6 o'clock, showing up to practice, because if they don't, their kids can't play. You got to understand, like we were talking about earlier, you can't expect what you want out of everyone. You got to understand people's circumstances. And you know what I mean? It's tough for those people. They're volunteering. They're putting in work. They're working 10 hours a day and then showing up, and you expect them to show up for 3 hours to work with you on a weekend. That'd be great if they do, but you have to understand why they don't sometimes,
Yeah, no, I agree. So I'm wondering during the season, Coach, or even off season, what does a daily schedule entail for you?
Well, West Virginia is one of the very few states, I think there are only 3 left, where from the time the season ends, I am not allowed to work with a ball of any sort with my kids until the season starts.
Okay.
I can do
Okay.
weightlifting, I can do conditioning, but I can't do any type of
Yeah.
baseball related training with them.
Okay.
Do I like that rule? Obviously I don't. I think it's, I think a lot of the logic behind that is because people are going to be saying, if you don't come do this, you're not going to play. Well, that's awful. You shouldn't, if coaches are doing that, then yes, that's the case. I just know from my point of view, we're not going to do that. Yeah. So my daily schedule basically is, right now, like I said, my 16, I have a 16-year-old son who's a 6'3.5" lefty. And I have a 12-year-old who's a catcher. So it's basically, you get up, you take them to school, you go to work, we get home, go to the weight room, we do all their baseball drills, and this is after basketball practice. So even with my own 2 children, it's constant. Would I love to be able to go 2 and 3 days a week, get those high school kids in there that aren't playing another sport and get some work in with them? That'd be great. Yeah. Right now, we're not allowed to do it. Now, we do have what are called flex days in our state. So from the end of our season to the start of next season, we have 12 days we can practice with our kids. Okay. The weather's been so bad, we're just holding off and starting our season 2 weeks early. So that's basically what we do here. So yeah, it's a constant grind. Now I do work with a travel organization that we practice a couple days a week, and we give hitting lessons and pitching lessons and catching lessons and all that stuff. So there's a lot of that involved too. It's called Top Prospects. It's a wonderful, wonderful organization.
That's outstanding. I wanted to ask you, I believe you also played, was it in the Pittsburgh Pirates AAA organization? Is that correct?
No, it wasn't true. I never made AAA. When they first interviewed me, the lady made a mistake. So what happened was I was, it was funny. I was a pitcher. Threw really hard for high school, and they had a tryout, and the guy that came there was Kent Tekulve. I didn't realize who he was at the time. So I went and threw. He asked me to come back again. I came back again, and they wanted me to play. So I went down to Virginia Beach for, a few weeks and met him there, threw in a few games, and then went a couple other places. Then it came to, it got to about the end of July, beginning of July, and I had to kind of make a decision. Like, I've got this scholarship. This is going to pay for my education. Yeah. So I got to get to training for that if that's what I want to do. So I just kind of gave up on it at that point. I really, really wanted to make sure I got out of there with an education. So I never really pursued trying to play in college, whether I could have or not. I don't know. But I got out of there with my education, master's degree, and don't have any single regret about any of it. But love baseball, love playing it. I also realized back then that there was the Mets. I remember one game I pitched at. It's a funny story. They had a AAA catcher down who was like injured. He's playing down in we were like barely single A. It's kind of like that farm single A thing they had way back 30 years ago. Catcher and I threw. I don't know how hard I threw, but it was in the 90s. Threw 2 fastballs by this guy. His catcher signals slider twice, and I shake him off. He comes out to the mound. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I just threw 1 by and 2 by." He's like, "Okay, go ahead." Well, this guy hit a ball probably hadn't come down yet. 30 years later, it was going through the trees, knocking trees down the left field. And I remember going to the dugout, and I said, "You told him what I had to throw, didn't you?" And the catcher put his arm on my shoulder and goes, "I didn't have to, Meat." I learned a quick lesson. Pay attention to your catcher. I'll never forget that. It's kind of funny how things like that happen. I might have hit home runs, I might have struck people out, but moments like that are the ones you remember. You know what I mean? The guy hit a home run 900 feet off of me. I'll never forget it.
One of the quotes I remember reading is that you just love the baseball, when it hits, that sound when it hits the mitt, and I was going to ask you just about the game, what makes it so special, not only to coaching, but also when you played as well. I just had to ask you about that, Coach McNew.
Well, there's not one of the things I love about baseball, first of all, there's not a better sound in sports than a ball hitting a mitt, I think, or that and a ball hitting a wood bat. Yeah. I love it so much that we actually in practice sometimes we'll make our guys get in groups when we're inside and try to throw the ball so it hits the other side all at the same time to really get that big pop. So, one of the biggest things I love about baseball is no matter how good you are, it's going to humble you on a daily basis. Yeah. So you can get this big hit. I'm the greatest hitter in the world. I've hit 30-some home runs this year, and all of a sudden you're getting humbled. Some guy's going to make you look like you've never swung a bat in your life. I think that's what's so great about it. That, along with the fact that it's an individual sport played as a team. Very few sports are like that. Very few moments in life are like that. Yep. You know, I can be a shortstop and I can make the greatest play in the world and the greatest throw, and my first baseman can drop it. So it's an individual sport played as a team. And all the way baseball is, it humbles you. It teaches you patience. It teaches you concentration. You know, you're standing out there in center field. You might be out there for 2 innings and never see a ball, but you got to be ready for that 35 minutes out there with nothing happening, because the one that comes to you, if you're not ready, you're going to look like a fool out there. I love that part. I love the part of, I think it's so different than any other sport. I mean, hitting a round ball with a round bat, people don't realize how difficult that actually is to do. Mm-hmm. So the amount of work it takes to put into being good at that, if you can get a kid to understand that amount, and, you know, I always tell people that I realized, you know, I'm going to be a dad here for a minute. I realized how good my kids were going to be at it when they started asking me to do it. Yeah. When I wasn't going, hey, we need to go do this, when they're coming to me and say, hey, we need to go hit. So the amount of work it takes to be really good at that, if you can get to that point, if that work ethic carries over into being an accountant or a forensic scientist or whatever you decide to do after you are done playing, mm-hmm. it's going to just benefit you so much. And very few sports are like that. You know what I mean? Like football happens in a 2-second burst almost all the time. Baseball happens in a who knows what's going to happen burst. Yeah. And I love the fact of that. It's so great. And just to watch the camaraderie with kids, I love watching kids warm up. I love watching kids, you know, practice to me is way more fun than a game. Yeah. Just to watch that and just to be able to teach them the life lessons that are involved in being able to let something go. You know, you might strike out in a big situation. That's actually really good for you. You know, you're going to learn from that way more than you are hitting a grand slam that wins a game. You're going to, from the humility of it, you're going to learn way more life lessons than you are from the successes. And there are very few things in life that are like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And, you know, it's so different than golf. Golf, I can hit a bad shot. I get to wait a minute and hit another one. I can recover from that. Baseball, I strike out. It might be an hour before I get to do it again. You know what I mean? And I get to stew on it. And to be able to get that out of your mind it just makes you such a better person, much less a player. No, it's true. Just have a couple more left. Coach McNew, I wanted to also ask you about owner Pro PT, you know, said is important to you as well. If you want to just, you know, tell everyone out there about that as well. Yeah, very much so. My wife is a physical therapist. I'm an MBA. It's a good combination. So we opened our first practice, it'll be 21 years ago, August. We're up to 3 practices now. It's kind of one of those things that's the gratification of it's wonderful. You know, you have someone who's been in the hospital come in, an elderly person who's, you know, been in the hospital because they keep falling, and to be able to see those people come in and be able to, for example, get their balance better so where they're not falling again, or a kid who, you know, tears an ACL and you're able to get him back before that season's over. Yeah. It's one of those things that it's a long process, but you know, if it's done correctly, you're going to see the results of that. And also just being able to help the general public's a great thing, you know. So we're super proud of our clinics. Love every minute, love working together. Shocking to say that, but we, you know, my wife and I have figured out some type of relationship that we're able to work together and not kill each other. Having 3 clinics is good because now one of us gets to go to one of the other ones. Sometimes we're not all in the same building at the same time. But yeah, it's been a wonderful. We're unbelievably proud of it. I think we're done. I think 3's enough. I'm 53 years old now, so I think we're done with expansion. I guess that connection must be great because you have athletes coming in as well who are also, you know, going through that, you know, period of time, recovering from, you know, I said a major injury, to get back out onto the field is something where you can, you know, have that, you know, that conversation and be able to relate as well, Coach McNew. 100%. It's the fact that, you know, a lot of kids want to get back as soon as they can, which is what our goal is, our clinics is. We want to get them back as soon as they can, but you got to add the safely part at the end of that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yes. You might be able to get back in 2 weeks, but you're going to get hurt again. You might be able to, if you can be patient and wait 3 weeks, you're probably going to, you know, be okay and be able to continue playing that year. So yeah, that's a great thing, you know, and it's also a great thing to be able to say, hey, you know, the basketball coach has a kid twist an ankle. I can probably get that kid in quicker to one of our places just because of my connection with the school than, than a lot of, so that's a wonderful thing too.
That's wonderful. To talk about family, and before we came on the air, you have a very personal story to tell, Coach McNew. So I'm going to allow you, yeah.
Sounds great. So I'll kind of, might get a little long, so I apologize. So I was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic when I was 8 years old. Okay. When I got into my early to mid 40s, obviously, let's start this. They don't, obviously, 40s, well, I guess that's about 45 years ago now, they obviously didn't know as much about type 1 diabetes as they do now. So after being a diabetic for roughly 38 years, well, at the time, but when things started to notice things were getting bad, you're going to have damage to your kidneys and things like that. It's just, they didn't know enough about it. So when I was in my mid to late 40s, I started seeing elevated creatinine levels and things like that. Luckily, I exercised and things like that. I kept myself in the fact, but it got to the point when about 2.5 years ago where, okay, we're going to have to get on a kidney transplant list, which is a scary thing to hear, to be honest. I mean, as honest as you can be. It's a really scary thing to hear. I was probably about 2 months away from being on a home dialysis machine when I got the call. But the great part about it was I had kept myself in good enough physical condition that I was actually able to do a kidney and pancreas simultaneous transplant. So after being a diabetic for 43 years, I had this transplant and haven't taken a drop of insulin since. I also realized at, a month or maybe, it was about 4 months of just brutal recovery. After that, I started realizing how bad I had felt for so long. So I now realize, how important things like organ donation, everyone should check the box on their driver's license for organ donation. It's hard for me to talk about this, so I get choked up, so I apologize.
No, it's okay.
Give me 1 second. So some guy that I have no idea where he lives, whatever happened, something very, very I'll get through it. So something devastating happened to this guy's family. I'll never know him. I'll never know the situation. I'll never be able to talk to his family about it. But because he's willing to do that, that devastation saved my family. So that is at times a very difficult thing to live with. I understand that the circumstances didn't change because of what I needed. I didn't cause any of that. So it's such a gift, and I could never thank that guy's family enough. But I do never forget what his family had to go through to save mine.
Well said, Coach. I'm sure family support. I mean, it's so key for you. Your wife, your sons, just as a father and husband. I'm a father as well of 2 kids, 2 young kids. Talk about that. And the job you've done, I said with them, fantastic job, with sports, but just talk about this, journey, with them.
Well, yeah, it's been amazing. I'm a very private person when it comes to that kind of stuff. So when it happened, no one really even knew that I was sick. So a lot of people were really shocked by that, but my kids knew. It was a very, and it all happened so fast. That was difficult on my kids too. To be honest with you, I was sitting around on December 10th of 2019, and my phone rings. It's literally a number I don't recognize. So I think it's a telemarketer. It's 10 o'clock at night. I don't answer it. Then it calls back again. I'm like, another telemarketer. I don't answer it. Well, then I get a text from the same number that says, "We have a donor. Please answer your phone." So I answer my phone. It's 10 o'clock at night, and they're like, "Get dressed." And I have my transplant done at the University of Maryland, which is 3.5 hours away. So it's 10 o'clock at night. My kids, all of a sudden, I got to get them out of bed and say, "Hey, I'm going to do this." So they're in, as they're trying to not panic, but they're ready to panic. So, I'm like, guys, I want to talk to you guys a little more about this, but I got to go. So I leave my house at 10:30 at night, and I'm in surgery at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
So it was like bam, 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 bam. And then, the first 2 days after, I don't really remember anything about. But my doctor was wonderful. He was really, really honest with me up front. He told me, a kidney transplant, just a kidney transplant, 2 or 3 weeks, you're probably going to be back to normal. He said, you're in for 4 months of hell, basically is what he told me. And he was right. It was brutal. But now, I feel like 30 years old again. It's been amazing. I've got all this energy and stuff that I had equated to just being 50 years old back then. You know what I mean? I thought I'm supposed to not feel this good. I'm 50 years old. I now realize that I was in, a lot worse health shape than I am now. So now it's just the balancing act of medications and blood tests every 2 weeks. But, like I said, wouldn't change a thing. Just to think back of 3 years ago, wondering whether you're going to see your kids graduate high school, much less ever get married. Now to know that, is that guaranteed to happen? No, but that's not guaranteed to happen for any of us. But to know that I now have a chance to do that is just, amazing.
Yeah, it definitely, puts life into perspective, and you cherish every day. Like, as you said, I mean, not tomorrow's not a given, so you need to, embrace, said the day, that is in front of you.
It really made me realize how much time we as a humanity, I guess, spend on letting yourself get tied up and upset with such frivolous things. Like there's so many things in life that you're like, why am I even worried about this? It's and that's been great too, because now I can look at my kids and they'll come to me with something. I'm like, why do you care? Like, why do you care that this kid that you're not even friends with is saying this? So what? Just let it go, man.
Yeah.
Stay out
Life's
of it.
too short.
Don't waste your time on things like that. So so in that way, it's taught me a lot of really, really valuable lessons at the same time.
It's great. You're in a perfect spot, Coach McNew, to offer advice, to younger, athletes, and then also coaches as well, who are either in the profession or want to break into the ranks. So just wondering what your message, what would your advice be to them?
Well, like I said, I really, really love when kids that are playing come up and I'd love to coach sometime. Like I said, it's like I tell everybody, it's not all about wins. We don't win a ton of games here. It's just where we are. Would it be great to go coach somewhere? It's got this big budget and all that stuff. Sure. But that's not what feeds my family. So I'm not going anywhere. You know what I mean? So I just tell everybody, don't ever get caught up in thinking you know everything, because you don't. You never will. If you're not constantly evolving as a coach, you're going to, there used to be a great quote by somebody. If you're not constantly evolving, you're dying. So if you want to be a good coach, you don't have to be great. You got to evolve. You have to constantly be looking at what the people that are smarter than you were doing. Like I was saying, these professional coaches, college coaches, they're there for a reason. They know what they're doing. Learn from them. Same with kids. Teach them. If you can teach kids work ethic and being respectful to everyone around you, they're going to go a long way in life. And to me, that's, like I said, I think that's the most important part of coaching, is just letting kids know what it takes to become a successful adult before you teach them to be a successful player. And it goes together, but the adult part is more important than the player part to me.
It's great. Okay, Coach McNew. I've introduced this segment in my interviews that the person who I interview gets the last word. So the floor is yours, in terms of, with Preston High School, family, friends, coaches. I leave it to you, Coach McNew.
Okay. The only thing I would say to people is, if you want to be great at this game, one thing you always got to remember is, I don't care how hard you're working, someone's out working you. So if you can go through life remembering that in anything, whatever you think you're doing, if you're working hard enough, you're not. You're not working as hard as you need to be. And if you can get to that point in your life where you can realize that, and you're going to be successful. And I think that's the most important thing for any adult to teach any younger person, no matter whether you're coaching or teaching or whatever it is. Get the kids understanding what it takes to be successful in life, because they're our future generation, and our generation's screwed it up enough for them. Let's let them figure out how to fix it.
Coach McNew, an absolute, honor and privilege, interviewing you. Thank you so much for the time. Wishing you continued success as the head baseball coach of Preston High School and owner of Pro PT.
I appreciate it greatly, and I appreciate your time, man.